There's an evolutionary trait so rare that most of the human species never developed it, and somehow it's the entire reason milk became one of the biggest industries on Earth. Every mammal alive produces milk for its own young. Humans are the only species that drinks another animal's milk into adulthood, and even then, only one kind, from one animal, almost everywhere on the planet. So here's the actual question. If humans can technically drink milk from any mammal, why did the entire world converge on cows and almost completely ignore every other option? Chapter 1. The gene. Most humans don't have. Start with the obvious biological wall, because it explains more than people expect. Lactase, the enzyme that breaks down lactose in milk, is only produced by all mammals as infants and normally shuts off after weaning. Roughly 65% of the global adult population loses most of their lactase production entirely, a completely normal default state called lactase non-persistence. A genetic mutation appearing independently in a few isolated populations around 7,500 years ago in Europe and separately in parts of Africa and the Middle East kept lactase production switched on into adulthood. That mutation only became common in populations with a long history of dairy farming, which is why lactose tolerance today maps almost perfectly onto regions with deep cattle herding traditions and almost nowhere else. Chapter 2. Why cows won the milk race. Here's where it gets more interesting because biology explains who could drink milk, not which animal's milk they drank. Cattle produce dramatically more milk per animal than nearly any other domesticated mammal, largely due to selective breeding over thousands of years specifically for higher yield. A dairy cow can produce over 20 liters a day. A goat produces a fraction of that. A camel, while nutritious, produces milk far less consistently and requires a completely different, harder-to-scale management system. Cattle were also already being farmed for meat, labor, and hide, so milk became an efficient secondary output of an animal. Humans were already raising its scale. Once regions leaned into cattle for dairy, an entire selective breeding feedback loop took over. Higher-yield cows got bred more, further widening the gap between cattle and every other milk-producing animal. Chapter 3. The animals that almost made the cut. This is where culture and geography decided the rest. In regions without cattle, other animals filled the same role. Mongolia and Central Asia built dairy traditions around mare's milk, fermented into a drink called kumis. Parts of North Africa and the Middle East rely on camel milk, which is nutritionally dense and better suited to arid climates than cow milk. Scandinavian and Arctic communities historically used reindeer milk, though in far smaller quantities due to low yield per animal. None of these ever scaled globally the way cow milk did, because global trade, colonization, and industrial agriculture were dominated by cultures that had already standardized on cattle, exporting that standard along with everything else. Chapter 4. The exceptions that prove the rule. Not every attempt to industrialize alternative milk succeeded, and the failures reveal how much of this comes down to yield and infrastructure rather than taste or safety. Camel milk companies have tried entering Western markets multiple times over the past 2 decades, consistently struggling against the sheer efficiency of existing cow dairy supply chains already built over a century. Donkey milk, historically prized in parts of the Mediterranean for its similarity to human breast milk, remains a niche specialty item today, specifically because donkeys produce extremely little milk per animal, making commercial scale nearly impossible. Closer. So the real answer isn't that cow milk is nutritionally superior or that other animals' milk is somehow unsafe. It's that one species happened to combine a rare human genetic mutation with an animal that happened to produce enormous quantities of milk at exactly the moment large-scale agriculture was being built around it. Somewhere in Mongolia right now, someone is drinking fermented mare's milk exactly the way their ancestors did for 1,000 years, completely disconnected from the industry that made cow milk a global default. It was never really about which milk tastes best. It was about which animal happened to be standing in the right field at the right moment in history,